Welcome. Thank you for joining us. My name is Anna Feder, and I am working with the Center for the Defense of Academic Freedom at the AAUP for a series that we're calling Faculty on the Front Lines, stories of faculty that are facing repression. The project started with 10 faculty all facing repression for their support of Palestinian liberation. And we are expanding the program because, of course, there are so many other folks facing repression right now. And so this is one of the many conversations we're hoping to have around that series with some of the folks that participate. We do have an interview both with Dr. Rupa Marya, who is here, and Dr. Hea Kil that are up on our YouTube channel, and we'll link to that. So I want to start by inviting Dr. Rupa Marya to give a little bit of information on the repression that she was facing and then how she's defending herself and where she's going from here.
Yes, thank you, Anna, and it's so good to be with you all, especially Sang, whose defense I got to watch, and it was very inspiring. So I am a badge of honor fired for speaking out about the genocide in Gaza as a professor of medicine at the University of California, San Francisco, where I held an academic appointment for over 20 years. So I trained there as a resident and was on as faculty. My focus is scholarly and in my practice is in healthcare for all, specifically looking at the health impacts of colonization. That scholarship caught the ire of the administration of UCSF, probably most visibly during the George Floyd times, speaking out about police violence, white supremacy, and then onwards with Gaza. So once I started speaking about the genocide in Gaza, and I was on the phone with Dr. Ghassan Abu Sitta in October and November of 2023 as he was describing the deteriorating conditions there, the frank attacks on hospitals and healthcare systems and healthcare workers by the Israeli military. I started speaking out in 2023. In November, I started getting targeted at work. I was then put under another faculty conduct investigation for my speech, and then was suspended in September of 2024 for voicing out loud in public that several medical students were concerned that someone had come from Israel into the medical school. And they were asking, like, hey, what did this person do last year? Should they be coming to medical school? Should we be training people who come from a place where military service is mandatory to become a doctor when there's a genocide happening? And these are urgent matters of professional ethics, especially now that we just saw a report from the University of Southern California that unclaimed cadavers from Keck Medical Center are being sold to the U.S. military. And the U.S. military and IDF soldiers are practicing at LA General, putting these cadavers on artificial respirators, artificial blood, creating battle wound injuries, so blowing up these people's body parts, and then practicing how to patch them up. So when we ask these questions, like, should we have these people coming into our medical schools? How are they violating medical ethics? How are they violating the principles and practices we have around creating health equity, advancing health equity in the United States? These are urgent questions of my scholarship. This is what I'm an expert in. This is what I've been invited to around the world, to the UN, on the Lancet Commission for Anti-Racism in Medicine. This is what my book is about. So in September of 2024, I was suspended for saying this out loud. In October of 2024, they then sort of tried to frame me as a threat to patient safety. And then by May of 2025, they fired me. And they fired me without a hearing in front of the academic senate, which I requested several times, which they knew I was due. And in July, I sued UCSF. So I sued them in federal court for a violation of my First Amendment rights. I sued them in state court for a violation of my civil rights and breach of contract. And so where that's at right now, they have filed motions to dismiss. Probably the most worrisome thing is they filed an anti-SLAPP motion, which is a motion that, is supposed to protect sort of the weaker party, not the bullies, in these kinds of situations. So these corporations and very wealthy, endowed institutions are going after people like us who are trying to talk about justice, talk about equity, talk about health for all, and trying to frame us as somehow racist or derelict or somehow undermining, the values that we should stand for in a society. In order to stand for health for all, doctors need to be able to have protected speech, and academic doctors especially, and especially those of us who study health equity and study disparities. And so while my faculty colleagues remained quiet while I was fired 6 months ago, now they're all calling me and saying, oh my God, we can't say the word marginalized. We can't say racism. We can't say transgendered. We can't say woman. We can't say black in the hospital anymore because we have to abide by these new federal guidelines. And I was like, well, what'd you think? I couldn't say genocide. I couldn't say child getting shot in the head, even though all of my colleagues coming back from Gaza are talking about it. So when doctors are silenced, people die. And we need to be able to have the ability to have our speech protected. And we might not always agree with each other, but that's the point of having a protected academy, is that we can debate, we can discuss, we can share evidence, and have those discussions. And what we're seeing right now in the United States is a complete degradation of those values that are totally essential for a functional democracy.
How did you find your legal counsel, and who are the folks that you're working with?
So I'm working with Mark Clayman as the lead lawyer. I have probably about 4 lawyers who are working with me. Not all of them want to be named. All the legal cases right now around academics in the United States are being supported by this kind of loose collective of lawyers who are all working with each other and supporting each other. I found out about Mark through other colleagues who were starting to seek legal advice. And Mark has been fighting the good fight pro bono for many, many years. And I worked with him as well as Dan Siegel before he passed. So for folks experiencing this kind of thing, Legal was one avenue. AAUP was another, to just, reach in and say, hey, this is what's happening to me. We need more help because they're employing legal firms that have 2,000 people. The Paul Weiss law firm, which is the law firm that gave Trump, $40 million worth of legal fees, they wrote the 462-page report that was the evidence for why I should be fired. That report contained like 20 fully redacted pages. I haven't seen the full evidence. I had such a public profile that was beyond my role as a UCSF professor. I was a published author. My book has been translated into 7 languages. That was beyond my role as a UCSF professor. I work as a community activist, working with people around food and medicine and health and land return to California Native people. That was beyond my role as a California University professor. But they used my employment as an opportunity to try to silence my speech and now to try to financially destroy my life. It's a very vicious thing. And that's why it needs to be fought. It needs to be heard, needs to be successful, because it's not just about me. It's about the future of all of medicine. If I cannot speak about a child in Gaza, who's next that we cannot speak about?
I want to pass it now to Hank Reichman. You can tell us a bit about your involvement in Zhang's case.
I was chair of the Committee on Academic Freedom and Tenure at the AAUP from 2012 to 2021. I've written 2 books on academic freedom, including what I think is, I'd like to claim, is the single best introduction to the topic, called Understanding Academic Freedom, a second edition, which takes into account a lot of the events of the last couple of years, including some of the challenges to academic freedom presented by the war in Gaza. And I was contacted by Zhang as a potential expert witness. And of course, my involvement is not based around a question of support or not support for the content of their expression. It's about, in this case, applying the rules of academic freedom, the general principles that we uphold, to speech that at the moment is considered by university administrators, and of course, since the election of President Trump, especially to the federal government, but even that before that, the Biden administration, applying those same principles that we would apply to other issues. And of course, I think listening to Rupa talk about her case, about what I know much less about her case than I do about Zhang's case, I think it's clear that both her case and Zhang's case, and the case of dozens of similarly situated people around the country, point to really 2 basic conditions. One is that war times are never good times for academic freedom, or for that matter, for civil rights and freedoms in general, including, as we see in the United States, in countries that are not necessarily directly involved in the war, although the United States clearly, for its support of the Israeli government, has been indirectly involved in the war. The other principle, I think, is to see that in the context, especially since the Trump administration has come into office, of an all-out attack on not just the principles of academic freedom, but on the whole independence of the American higher education system. And in that context, of course, these cases become increasingly important. And what happened for me is, when I looked at Zhang's case, my first question to ask was, well, it is possible for a faculty member to bring their own politics into their teaching or research in ways that are not protected by academic freedom. So the first question I had to ask was Song activity indeed protected by academic freedom? And I came to the conclusion that yes, it was, because Song was hired as a tenured full professor of justice studies at San Jose State. And it seems to me that once San Jose State decides to have a program in justice studies, and once they decide to grant tenure to somebody in justice studies, they're acknowledging that person's expertise and that person's involvement is going to involve, well, standing up for people where she believes there are cases of injustice. And indeed, it seemed to me, looking at the specifics of Song's case, and of course she'll talk about them herself, that she did little more than do that. She did it vigorously, she did it boldly, but at no point did she, in exercising her point of view as an expert in that field and also as a citizen of both the United States and the university, at no point did she conduct herself in a way that violated either the ethical demands of her profession or the rights of any other member of the university community. Now, I think looking at Rupa's case, which I don't know all the details in the same way, I think it's similar. Here we have a scholar who studies precisely these issues. Now, a medical school may feel they don't need somebody in health ethics, but once they make that decision, then they have to give that person the leeway to actually function in that capacity and pursue that scholarship. And on that basis, it seems to me, Rupa's scholarship led her both as a faculty member and a professional in her field, which is not pulmonology, it's medical ethics, and as a citizen both of the UCSF community and of California and the United States, to voice her views. Those views may not be welcome by the trustees of the University of California or the administration of UCSF Medical School, and for a number of reasons, either because they don't agree with them or because they fear that powerful individuals in politics, among the donor class, etc., may find them offensive, that it may bring bad publicity to the university, that it may cause security issues, because there are, as we know, dangerous people out there who threaten people with controversial ideas, and that may cause problems. Those are all concerns the university may have. They are not by themselves legitimate reasons to silence a professor. And that was the basis on which I came to Song's case and testified at her hearing, which I am hoping she was at least given a faculty hearing according to the terms of her contract and university policy. And I'm hoping that faculty hearing will indeed rule in her favor and hopefully carry the day, as it should. If it doesn't, I assume she will proceed probably the legal case. And I would expect in that case, the AAUP may also proceed in conducting an investigation, although that's not something I can promise or that will be my decision.
Sang, I want to invite you into the conversation to talk about your case, about this defense, the public hearing, and then the other ways in which you're defending yourself against these spurless claims by the institution.
My name's Hea Kil, and I was terminated this summer for supporting my students fighting a genocide in 2024. And I've appealed my termination using the collective bargaining agreements, Article 19, with the public hearing that just took place. Quick overview of my case is that despite Henry Reichman's nice compliments that I did something bold and brave, I actually just did my job duties. I was hired to do this job. I showed up to this job and I performed my duties and responsibilities as it was outlined in my job contract. And so I think the only difference that I made in terms of other faculty that might be similarly situated is that I, through media campaigns, basically, to try to protect the students and myself along the way. And when the students decided to do an encampment, I brought heavy media presence to the encampment to make sure that they were protected by any kind of adverse police action or any outside agitators, like we saw what happened in New York and LA on those campuses. And so I really used my position as a media and communication scholar to make sure that the students were protected and that these anti-genocide protests on my campus were getting some news media attention. I think that also made the administrative stakeholders on my campus really upset with me. And so I think that's why, additionally, they sought my termination to silence me for good, even though the case they have against me is very weak. And so the question I think I've been asked today is, how did I, mount my defense? So the first mounting of my defense was to organize the news media to cover what was happening on my campus. And so I was very lucky to get the San Francisco Chronicle, the LA Times, Inside Higher Ed, Chronicle of Higher Ed, and many other news media outlets to keep on following my case as I was trying to protect my students. I think the next ways in which I mounted my defense was with my union. I worked with other unionists to pass a series of resolutions at our CFA assemblies. And so in my capacity as the former co-chair of the Palestine Arab Muslim Caucus, we did finally pass a ceasefire, no arms for Israel, sanctuary campus resolution. And then the third and final stage was the preparation for my public hearing. So kind of very similar to what like Rupa has done to advocate for herself. I had to create a support group of unionists, basically. And I think maybe there might have been some other community members involved, but generally it was unionists, activists that I trust. And so I pulled a bunch of people from 3 caucuses to support me as I kind of developed my arguments, had them look at my arguments, give me feedback. They did a tremendous amount of work looking at my Public Records Act requests, the emails that I got, the videos I got, all that stuff. I also got like 1,000 pages of witness testimonies from the investigation they opened up on me. And so I was able to kind of divvy up the labor and ask them to look for the greatest hits in this stuff. And all that was extremely important to the presentation of my case. And then I was able to also defend 4 other faculty on 3 other campuses, including San Jose State University, with very great results. And so by the time I had my public hearing, I was in a perfect position to defend myself. And I'm going to follow a timeline of how things unfolded for me, because that's the best way to carry people who don't know you and might not care about your story, and to carry them on the unfolding of events, that timeline, to show them what happened to you in an evidence-based manner that also builds empathy for your positionality on why you made the decisions that you made along the way. And so I think I did the very best job I could possibly do with the support of my union to mount my defense against this, unfair and frankly politically targeted termination that I suffered, as well as Rupa.
It was really impressive. You came with just email after email, and you had really strong folks who you brought to help defend your case. It was a really impressive the way that you structured your arguments and just how thorough you were, especially holding it up to their case. It made their case look so absurd.
I thought it was excellent as well. But one of the things that was really, I thought was important when I came into it, and Sung gave me all the materials that she got from the university, and I went through them. And it was important as I went through it to sit there and say, okay, what can I do? I'm not a witness in the sense that I was there, and I can't say, well, you're lying about X, But what I can do is look and see what is their case, and how can I look at it as the strongest way possible, and then say, even accepting all their facts, does this rise to the level of what they're charging? And it was clear to me it wasn't. And I think that was important. And I was struck when Rupa was talking about her case, and she said she got this humongous report from Paul Weiss. And then when she said there were 20 pages redacted, Wow. So I am assuming that in discovery in court, you should be able to get access to that.
Their legal maneuvers are actually to prevent me getting access to
I
all of
would
that,
imagine.
right?
I would imagine, and that's really like incredible. I mean, you can redact individual names. I understand that. I think most of us do.
Whole
But
black rectangles,
yeah.
whole black rectangles.
But at any rate, and I think that's the basis. And you look and say, okay, what is their case? And even looking at from their point of view, then applying the principles. And that's why it was so important I think for me when I thought, how best can I help Song in this? And how best can the AAUP or any other organization help these dozens of faculty members, of whom you are just two, of course, who are facing these kinds of things. And it's by sitting there and looking at saying, look, it doesn't matter a whit whether I, Professor Reichman from the, here, not representing the AAUP, but that's my background, whether I agree with what you've said, disagree with what you've said, agree with what you've done or not, is I have to sit there and go, what are the rights of faculty members in general? And I think an important moment came to me when Rupa was talking, when she said that a lot of her colleagues remained silent when she was under attack. And she's now hearing from them saying, oh my God, now we can't even do this, and now we can't even do that, et cetera. And I think that's a big lesson for everybody because, it's the old Dietrich Bonhoeffer when they came for these people, I wasn't one, so et cetera. But it's not just that. If principles of academic freedom don't apply to some specific group, if there's an exception we can make, people used to call it the Palestine exception, then what's to prevent there being another exception and another exception and another exception? And so when we're fighting for the rights of somebody whose views may not be popular among the whole faculty, may not be popular with not just the administration, but anyway, we're fighting really for the rights of everybody. And that's the most important principle, it seems to me. Now, I can't blame people like Rupa and Song for also fighting for what they believe in.
During COVID, Vinay Prasad at UCSF put out some crazy anti-vax stuff, anti-science. Like half of the faculty at UCSF were up in arms. Like, how can you guys let this guy talk like this? And all we heard is we support academic freedom and we support different opinions. We support freedom of speech. And it's not to say I don't think we should silence those doctors. I'm not saying that. But if we're going to tolerate that kind of wackadoodle at a science-based institution, why won't we tolerate my wackadoodle? Don't shoot children in the head. We have to look at this as not just viewpoint discrimination. This is like, are you harming our communities? Or are your words, actions, and behaviors trying to get health for all people? And is that being now framed as being somehow hateful? I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's not to silence any of these viewpoints, but our voices are being shut down throughout the U.S. Academy, and it's a very dangerous time.
I don't disagree with that. I want to make one thing that I think is really should be clear. It's one thing to express your views as a scientist. It's quite a different thing to engage in research that is pseudoscience. It's free speech for an electrical engineer to advocate Holocaust denial, and I'm thinking of one in particular at Northwestern University. It is not free speech for a professor of modern European history to teach that in class. In the same way, it's free speech for a doctor to have an eccentric, idiosyncratic, whether right or wrong, view on some medical issue. It's quite a different thing for that doctor to teach it in a medical school class or to conduct research under the auspices of the medical school to do that. So I think those are very different things. So in your case, obviously, what your extramural expression is closely related to your own expertise, to be sure. But you were not doing it in some way that violates medical ethics or et cetera.
I'm going to invite Sang in because it sounds like there was something that you wanted to add into what you were talking about in terms of your defense in your case.
The reason why I do these public hearings too is I really want to inspire other faculty to take the public hearing route and not go contractual behind closed doors, because I think that The public hearing route is the more political venue, and especially if it's related to racism, classism, sexism, homophobia, all those. I think that the public hearing route is the better venue. And so that's why with my public hearing, because I had so much experience, I took the lead in my defense. If you notice, I did most of the cross-examination of their witnesses, and their defense was mostly hearsay. And so I think the point that I want to express to faculty is that there's been such a deep erosion of the equivalent equation of faculty co-governance, right? Where faculty is on one side of the equation and admins are the other side of the equation. So much to the point where faculty kind of internalize some kind of like subordinated position to admin, which I find deeply, deeply troubling. And it's almost like we're almost harming our own rights to faculty co-governance when we act like subordinates to administrators. And so that's why I think it was really important, because I did have a conversation with my CFA co-representative about who was going to take the lead. And I was like, I'm definitely going to take the lead in my defense. And I definitely want to take the lead in most of the cross-examinations of their witnesses, because I want to show faculty that we are not subordinate to administrators. And just because they have these fancy VP or P, whatever, AVP kind of things, or provost or whatever titles that sound like cheese, like that we still have this power as faculty, as an individual on a collective level, to our right of co-governance, and that these attacks on us for our speech, for what we research, for how we practice our research, for how we mentor students, can be defended by us. So I'm just really strongly encouraging faculty to take that back. We've eroded it through our lack of robust participation in the Senate, as well as our posturing towards administrators.
And these institutions don't exist without the work of faculty, without the work of staff, without the energy of students,
The industry looks scary. Bill Gates was just, being super casual about saying that the whole educational industry is going to die as the way we know it, because AI is going to take over, and he predicted in 10 years. So the attack on faculty, right of co-governance, as well as our existence, is at stake right now. And we need to organize, we need to fight back in order to protect and defend our industry, which is vital for democracy.
Interesting that you should say that, saying, because you hear of this AI takeover of medicine. And this is happening at the time where women are now greater than 55% of the graduating medical classes over the last decade. So the field is being really dominated by women, from the surgeons to the internists to the specialists, subspecialists. And now at this time we get this, maybe we're going to listen to this computer rather than you. Right? So it's a very interesting time in terms of all these intersections and how power is being stripped from faculty like ourselves. Like, we're two women of color. And how many people who have been banned, of the dozens of scholars that you mentioned, Hank, how many are people of color across the United States whose scholarship, women whose scholarship and interests, or staff people whose interest is in advancing equity?
Thank you both for sort of framing what's at stake here. I want to hear about, in the time we have left, is what are the resources? Who are the allies in all of this?
So San Jose State University, even though it's located in the Bay Area, is very conservative. The faculty are very demoralized. They don't speak out. We don't have much of an activist community on campus. So I've been kind of swimming in this environment for the almost last 20 years in my career there, understanding that this is institutional racism, sexism, all those intersections, and that this was going to be an uphill battle to try to organize faculty. And so that's when Rupa found me and reached out to me, telling me that she had a similar experience at UCSF being fired there. I wasn't surprised that she had a very similar experience, or that the silence might still resound for her like it does for me right now. So the first thing to do is to bust through that isolation by finding like-minded people. And so it's really a political miracle that Rupa and I can find each other in the sea of silence and the sea of shaming for speaking out, and to really kind of work on those networks, And so that's the same kind of network in which I found you, Anna, right? We've all been treated kind of similarly for doing the right thing and speaking out against a genocide in a time where it wasn't geopolitically popular to do so. That's the one first thing is like you need that like at least Fab Five people support system that's going to carry you through it. And they need to be spiritually good, grounded, politically astute kind of folks. And then the next thing is then you turn to either the grassroots organizations, your union, all those like social justice groups, and you go to them and you directly ask for help. Don't be demure. That's not going to help you, right? And Rupa's been really good at advocating for herself, finding those grassroots groups, even more than I have, and really getting people to like sponsor, co-sponsor the things that she's cares about, interested in, including her own case. And then the third thing is publicity. Like you really have to really generate your own publicity, which is like, really not something that faculty are trained to do, right? I mean, for the things that we write, but not for like you being a target of something. It feels rather silly to do it, but you have to. It actually makes a lot of sense to do this, right? Because it's not just about your case. You're representing all faculty under attack. And you have a duty to step up if you're given the microphone to talk about your case in the context of this happening to a whole shitload of faculty and even more because, they passed that executive order against Antifa, whatever that means. And that thoroughly enlarges all the faculty that are going to get targeted now beyond just the Palestine exception. And so that we need to unite, we need to organize, and we need to resist together what's happening to this nation and its effects internationally.
I appreciate you addressing the idea that this is just about you. And I think that's where people get hung up. I'm just one person putting all this energy into focusing on you and your case, but it's really about all of the people that can't speak up, the people who are junior faculty, the people who are part-time faculty, all the people whose voices we aren't hearing because they've had to sign an NDA to get some kind of severance, that it's so important that the people who they're in a position to speak up are able to do it. And so, Rupa, I wanted to invite you in to share who are the allies, what are the resources, where can you point people?
If you're faculty who have been working closely with community, so like the community that I've been working and organizing with for 20 plus years in the Bay Area to advance their agendas for health equity, those are the people who really rallied around me. I think it's important to pull those allies really closely together to find people like saying that was like literally changed my mental health. There are so few people who understand, and it's probably her scholarship in justice studies, like what it is I do. I don't know too many doctors who were at Standing Rock. There weren't too many doctors calling racism and police violence a public health threat 10 years before George Floyd was assassinated, killed. And so when you're taking that step ahead of a curve, you need to find your allies. You need to find the people within the academy, not just here in the United States, but broadly across the world. But sometimes people might not hear the value of your case right away. Maybe you need to tell them the story 3 or 4 times for them to go, oh shit, this is actually really important. Like if a doctor like you is not successful in this case, what are the downstream effects? And that goes back to this is not just about me. And that's how it gets framed, like, oh, you're just centering yourself. No, this is about the safety of all of our patients. When I said Zionism in medicine needs to be examined as a health outcome, as a determinant of health outcomes, I meant it. And I meant a structural system of supremacism that puts some people's lives over here and other people's lives down here. What is the impact? Because we need to have an academy where we can call into question all these things. And this is what our community is starting to speak up about because they're starting to understand. And so it is a time to be brave. It is a time to be bold. The tide is changing. The tide is changing.
And Hank, I wanted to see if you had thoughts on resources for people fighting these attacks on academic freedom.
I think there are two contexts to put it. One is, and I think Rupa has done a very good job putting in the context of the broader movement, whether the issue is Palestine or anything else, the AAUP has long been fighting for the principles of academic freedom and shared governance with respect to what Song said earlier. Back in 1915, in its founding declaration, the AAUP said faculty members are the appointees, but in no real sense the employees of the trustees, by which they meant not that we don't have labor rights. They were not unionists, but they were in the era where they supported unions, but they wanted to point out that we are the university in a certain sense. But one thing the AAUP is not is it's not a national grievance office, but it does provide resources and advice. So I know sometimes we've been criticized we don't intervene or take up cases of certain people, but what we do is when people feel their academic freedom has been violated, they can write to the Department of Academic Freedom, Tenure and Governance in the AAUP, which unfortunately only has 4 full-time staff members, and they will get, at minimum, advice. They could get what we call a case letter, and Song got 3 of them, in which the AAUP staff writes to the institution and says, it appears to us that these fundamental principles are being violated. And in worst case scenarios, of course, especially if it resonates broadly throughout the profession, there may be an AAUP investigation or censure. In addition, now we do have the Center for Defense of Academic Freedom that I know Anna's been working with, that does often provide a different sort of advice. And they do have some experiences of other people who've been through it, which I think part of what we're doing right now is to help with that. There are, of course, other organizations that will fight, local organizations. There are attorneys. I know both Rupa and Song have been able to find attorneys who will do it pro bono. Sadly to say that so many of our institutions in the United States now are being intimidated by by both private interests in some ways, in the same way that our university administrations are, but also increasingly by the federal government.
I want to turn to both Rupa and Sang to end the conversation with, what would you want to share with somebody else going through this, in terms of words of encouragement, advice? And I'll start with you, Rupa.
Yeah, if you are an academic physician or anyone in healthcare, just reach out to me, find me on LinkedIn. There's a whole community of us that have been organizing who just demonstrate courage and give each other support. I would say, don't think you can fight this alone. Isolation is the name of their game. Isolation and shame. Don't be ashamed. You're on the right side of history. Things might get tough, things might get hard. So stand your ground, stand strong, reach out for support, get a good legal team, get help from organizations like Paralegal, AAUP if you can, and then find your community. We're all out here. We're here to support you. No one can do this alone. We can only do it together.
Sang, I want to let you have the last word about what would you say both people facing this and maybe even to people who could be allies for the people who are facing this.
I think for me, the biggest lesson and the advice that I'm going to give for people in this type of position, and Rupa understands this, is that the haters are going to hate you. And they're going to be really loud and vocal in hating you. And a lot of these haters are going to come from allied groups. And it's going to hurt so bad. But you have to have clarity of the moment, the bigger picture of the situation, and the fact that we're in MAGA mania full on right now. You need to stay grounded because there's a bigger picture, there's a bigger fight that needs to be won. And you got to turn down their hater pettiness to this tiniest volume ever. And you got to keep moving forward with the allies that you've built community and trust with, because there's so much work that we need to do before us. Just keep on organizing and fighting and uniting and encouraging the people that have stayed silent throughout the whole genocide that it's still not too late to speak up, that you can still find your voice and you can still speak out against this raging genocide that has not stopped since the ceasefire, still continues. And that you can educate yourself and you can organize with other people to do something about it.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining this conversation. And thank you to everyone watching. And I hope that you will check out all of the interviews. There's 10 so far for the Faculty on the Frontline series. It's up on the AAUP YouTube channel. And we're going to continue these conversations with the folks who are participating in this project. And I hope that you'll keep watching and listening.
I'm happy to update that we won the public hearing at San Jose State University. I had my hearing Thursday, November 6th, with 3 random faculty chosen from a roster of eligible faculty, and these faculty decided in my favor, gave me a victory and gave us all a victory. Unfortunately, the fight isn't over. The president has 15 days to respond, and I will guess that she won't agree with the faculty outcome and its findings. And then after, the president will most likely overturn that decision. It goes to arbitration, which will most likely take at least a couple months. One of the great wins, though it might seem minor, was that the faculty hearing noted in their findings that indeed that there was evidence of outside external pressure groups like Hillel, Silicon Valley in my case, that had seemed to have directed and ordered the SJSU president and provost to open an investigation on me, as well as how to investigate me and with what charges. So that was a really great win in verifying what AAUP had warned, was that there was external pressures on academia and on higher ed administrators to target faculty for their political speech. I consider this a bright spot in the resistance struggle, particularly in higher ed, and the battle continues for me and many others, but I do want us to all share in this as a collective win.